Hi, I'm Allison Freyberg, and welcome to Lecture 7, Being Clear and Direct, Cutting the Waste. Let's dive in. Is this you? How clearly and concisely you can articulate your thoughts when you're speaking? Not at all. That's me. I have a hard time. I wander all over the place. You've probably noticed that by now. Maybe a little better in writing, but you know when you get really, really good at it? I'm thinking if you're like me, you get really, really good at expressing your thoughts. Everything's clear at 2 a.m. when you're thinking about writing. So let's see if we can change that up a little bit. Okay. First of all, we need to think for a second about why our writing is unclear and what makes it unclear. Because business writing, especially, and academic writing, the writing I see on a day-to-day basis is so unclear. But let's see why that happens, right? We're not trying to write in an unclear way. Let's try to figure out why it happens. First, I think it's because we hide behind jargon. We hide behind cliches and vague terms, even if you just think about the kind of business speak that you hear, right? It's all over the place. Make fun of it all over social media, and for good reason, right? We use a lot of vague terms, abstract terms. We rely on a lot of cliches, all that kind of stuff. We are sloppy and unintentional about the words we use. We don't spend a lot of time thinking, is that really the right word I need here? And we have a tendency to think if we just say more words and repeat ourselves, that we're going to clarify our meaning. And that's not true. Okay. I often refer to this as Professor Itis. It's a real problem for people in my profession. We think if we just keep talking, it's going to be clearer. And it never is. But there's something that lies behind all of these tendencies. And you know what that is? It's fear. Because not only is it hard to write, it's a very vulnerable process. It's a process that asks us to put ourselves out there, to know that people are going to judge us, and to somehow push forth and still do it. And that's hard. And there's a lot of fear that comes with it. And not only in our current lives, but as we grew up, there's a lot of, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, we actually, if we got punished, our punishment was writing stuff. So we do a lot to make sure that we just don't like to write and that there's a lot of fear behind it. And I want to see if we can change that a bit today. So there's going to be 2 lectures on clear and direct writing. In this first lecture, we're going to talk about cutting the waste, cutting all the excess. And then in the next lecture, we'll look to add things that are actually going to clarify. So the 2 things we're going to work on today are determining your meaning ratio, and that's actually a term from Josh Bernoff's book, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we're going to eliminate wordiness. Big problem. Let's see what we can do. Determining your meaning ratio. So here's some typical business writing for you. The strategic aim is a piece from the UK, so you'll have the English spelling on it. The strategic aim is to standardize the infrastructures to drive down operating costs through supplies-based consolidation and leveraging group spend, as well as exploiting best-in-class technologies and practices to provide robust, scalable, and agile services with excellent customer experience. Huh? That does all of those things that I just mentioned. I have no idea what that's about. There sure are a lot of business words in there, a lot of jargon, a lot of fancy stuff to try to make the writer look good. But if your writing is about actually communicating with someone, this is terrible. What about this one? I'm going to read it through. Can you think of how to say this in just a couple of words? It is the opinion of the group assembled for the purpose of determining a probability of the likelihood of the meteorological related results and outcome for the period encompassing the next working day that the odds of precipitation in the near term are positive and reasonably expected. In 2 words, rain likely. We don't need a million words. We need the right words precisely. So I came across this book a couple of years ago, and I love it. Now it has a naughty name, but Josh Bernoff offers us a great book that is focused on business writing, but I'm bringing a couple of concepts into our course on analytical writing because they apply. And he says we can measure meaning by counting the words or text in a passage and figuring out which ones are meaningful and obviously which ones aren't. And if we divide the meaningful words by the total words, we're going to get what he calls a meaning ratio. And it's just a nice way to have a look at your writing and see which words are working or doing the work and see which words are there just cluttering up the page. He uses an example from a technology company called Inovalon. And this is how Inovalon explains who we are. Inovalon is a leading technology company. In fact, don't even look. Close your eyes, take a break, just listen to this. Inovalon is a leading technology company that combines advanced cloud-based data analytics and data-driven intervention platforms to achieve meaningful insight and impact in clinical and quality outcomes, utilization, and financial performance across the healthcare landscape. Inovalon's unique achievement of value is delivered through the effective progression of, quote, of turning data into insight, copyright, and insight into action, copyright. Large proprietary data sets, advanced integration technologies, sophisticated predictive analytics, data-driven intervention platforms, and deep subject matter expertise deliver a seamless end-to-end capability that brings the benefits of big data and large-scale analytics to the point of care. Whew, that is a mouthful. Let's see what Bernoff does with that. He's going to highlight in yellow that I'm going to show here the meaningless words. So words that have no meaning for most readers, a bunch of qualifying words, decoration words, and confusing jargon. And here it is. Everything in yellow is meaningless. It's vague, it's abstract, it has no meaning for most users, it's qualifying, it's decoration, it's confusing jargon. They're show-off words, nothing else. They're not designed to communicate. They're designed, whoever wrote this was trying to impress their boss and was trying to, quite frankly, condescend to consumers and prospective customers. It's show-off stuff. It's not about connecting with anybody. Now, Bernoff identifies the jargon and vague terms for the meaning ratio. There were 92 words in that passage. Only 54 were meaningful. So that meaning ratio, 54 divided by 92, is 59%. Now, I don't know about you, but last time I got 59% on something, I had to take the test again. That is not a good percentage. That is not a good ratio. Burnoff suggests, obviously, the best meaning ratio is 100%. That's really hard to do. But you're getting there at anything 80% and above. And anything below 70%, he says, is meaningless. You're not communicating. You're not creating a relationship with a reader. You are not connecting with a reader. So he rewrote the passage. And this is what he wrote. And again, I'd say close your eyes, sit back, relax, and listen to this one. Inovalon has more insight into health data than anyone else. We analyze that data and apply the knowledge to help you improve care options, reduce costs, and improve compliance. We help hospitals, doctors, insurance payers, and patients. We identify gaps in care, quality, and data integrity, and apply our unique capabilities to resolving them. I understand that. And I understand a lot of words, but this is something that's written by someone who wants to connect with me, who wants to clarify their message, who wants me to know what they do, not just think that they're all spiffy. This has a much higher meaning ratio. Each word chosen does work. Oh, let me jump back a second. So if you want to look at your own writing, try to take something that you've written and try like the real middle of the paper kind of stuff where you're really getting into the analysis and determine your meaning ratio. See what your numbers come out to be. Then you know what? Go ahead and look here. I'll be honest. Go ahead and look at those sections where you're just making stuff up to hit the page count. We know you're doing it. You know you're doing it. Find what your meaning ratio is there. It's probably pretty low. In our next segment, our next lecture, we're going to work on building up your meaning with words that are actually doing some good for you in terms of communication. But right now, we got to get rid of the junk that's just taking up space. The other thing we need to work on in terms of getting rid of the junk that's cleaning up space, taking up space, is eliminating wordiness. I imagine some of you have seen on papers over the years, this is wordy, right? But then we don't spend a lot of time really trying to figure out what that is and how to get rid of it. So this is from a little piece by William Zinsser called Simplicity, where he says that clutter is the disease of American writing. Secret of good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. And that's kind of what Burnoff is talking about as well. What I have for you is a few ways to eliminate wordiness, and it's going to break down in terms of a few strategies. Yeah, we want to cut the filler, we want to eliminate the obvious, we want to avoid expletives, there is, there are, that kind of stuff. We want to change words that are unnecessary. We want to avoid hedging or weasel words. We want to use active rather than passive verbs, again, when it's appropriate. And we want to avoid noun forms of verbs because we can get tighter. It's about becoming as tight as we can, as precise as we can. So let's see. I have a few strategies for you. Strategy 1 is to place the verb next to the subject that's doing the verb. And what will happen is a lot of the extra words will just fall away. Let's look at an example. Here's something that's pretty wordy. The staff liaison in the customer relations department has, in accordance with your wishes, and in alignment with our current policy, credited your account. That's a lot of words to say really this. We credited your account. What's the subject? We, whatever the company is. Do you think it really matters that it's the staff liaison? No. Do you think the person getting the account credited cares that it was the staff liaison? No. They just see your organization. If you're looking for a tuition credit, do you really care that it was person number 3 in the finance department? No. You just care that it's the University of Redlands that credited your account. Same thing here. We, what's the verb? Credited. What's the subject? What's the verb? Put them beside each other, and a lot of the other stuff just goes away. And I know you're panicking right now because you're already having trouble getting to page limits on papers. I promise you in the next lecture, I'll show you how to build. But there's no point in keeping useless words in your paper. You'll get to the page count, but it won't matter because no one will want to read it anyway. So my little thing here, subjects and verbs are kind of like Romeo and Juliet. They really want to be together. Now that didn't turn out very well, but we'll just forget that problem. But they love being together. And if you put them together, your sentences will start becoming more concise. One thing I hear a lot from my students who are in, as you know, you're them, but I hear a lot that, hey, I'm in business, so we need to be clear and direct. Yeah, you're right. You do need to be clear and direct. The problem is we're not being clear and direct. We're being wordy and vague and abstract and saying a lot of words that mean nothing to anybody. So we're going to try to hone in on what really being clear and direct means. Here's another example from strategy 1. Here's a wordy version. At a later date, Acme Education Partners will be revising the contract inasmuch as the law at the time has changed. Grammatically correct? Lousy though. Let's be concise. What's the subject? Acme Education Partners. What's the verb? Will revise. And then you just have the predicate at the end. What are they going to revise? That's what they're going to revise. Acme Education Partners will revise the contract when the law changes. Much tighter, much clearer. Subjects and verbs like being next to each other. Here's one more try at that. And this is something you might see more commonly in your papers. Professor of Economics, author, researcher, and Lackshine Chair of 21st Century Global Studies, Maria Gutierrez, in her book entitled Economics in Automation Times, she argues that automation will affect manufacturing industries the hardest. Ran out of breath. That's a bad sign. Okay, this is also grammatically incorrect because we have the subject, Maria Gutierrez, and then we have a reiteration of that subject there. So we have a grammatical error. I see this all the time. And this is someone trying to introduce the writer. Okay, that's great. We're going to talk about that when we get to quote burgers and using sources. But a lot of this stuff just isn't necessary. Here's the concise version. Economist. You tell me someone's an economist? Well, I know they've got a doctorate in economics. I know they've produced research. Now, I might not know they're a Lackshine chair, but does that really matter here? I don't need to know the title of the book. I just need to know she's an economist. And then who she is and what's her point. She argues that automation will affect manufacturing industries the hardest. Subject, verb, tighter. Again, don't panic that the sentence is shorter, because long, lousy sentences are not doing you any good. Strategy 2. Now we need to eliminate weasel words. These are the words we add. We all do it to make our sentences longer, to make our papers longer. They mean nothing. They're hedging. They're all over the place. Let's look at what I mean here. Here's a wordy sentence. In my opinion, I think that a possible solution to the high drop rate for part-time students in business school programs could be to lower tuition somewhat by creating partnerships with local companies. This is a writer that is trying to weasel out of being responsible for the statement. Look at all the words here that try to get out of being responsible. Hey, it's just my opinion. You can't call me to task on it. No, it's just my opinion. I think, I'm not sure, but I think that a possible solution, it might be a solution, it might not be, who knows, to the high drop rate, blah, 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 could be, is it or is it not? Okay, you are taking your place among the experts in the field. You don't get university degrees because you're kind of okay at something. You get it because you're a content expert with knowledge who has something to contribute. So take a stand. Put your idea out there. Somewhat. How much? Here. This is without the weasel words. By creating partnerships with local companies, business schools can lower tuition and retain more students. I want to see why this writer thinks that way. Show me the reasons. I'm excited. I'm engaged. I want to know more. I don't want to know what the wordy writer wrote. I can't even tell. There's so many hedge words in there, so many weasel words. If the word that you're using isn't doing any heavy lifting in the sentence, get rid of it. It's just undermining your credibility. Here's another example. In my opinion, many customers very much show a decided preference for simple and somewhat uncomplicated contracts. Oh. What's the subject? Customers. What do? They prefer simple contracts. Customers prefer simple contracts. Tell me more. I don't want to know any more from this writer. I want to know more from this writer. Okay, strategy 3, that's converting the passive voice to the active voice. Now, the passive voice is when you hide the subject doing the verb, right? So instead of saying, she hit the ball, you would say, the ball was hit. So I can't tell who hit it. I'll explain the bottom sentence in a minute, but let's look at this. So the business proposal was submitted last week to the incubation hub commonly known in the startup community as GrowMe. Who submitted it? I don't know. Now, there's nothing grammatically wrong with putting a sentence in the passive voice. But you should use the passive voice intentionally. So when you want to hide the subject or highlight the object. So in this case, it's the business proposal that's most important, not the person who wrote it. As a writer, maybe I didn't want to do that, right? Maybe I wanted to show that Claire Liu submitted the business proposal to the Grow Me Incubation Hub. If you are using the passive voice, use it because you intend to, because you want to highlight the object and hide the subject. Now, how do you tell if something's in the passive voice? This is a fun one. If you can add by zombies to the end of a sentence, it's passive voice. The ball was hit by zombies. The paper was written by zombies. The business proposal was submitted to Grow Me by zombies. Passive voice. Just be intentional about it. A lot of times, if you're not intentional about it, what happens is a sentence just starts growing out of hand, and not unlike zombies, and you're losing your meaning ratio. Here's another one. It is commonly known that employees who have gaps in their work history are often overlooked for interviews. By zombies, actually by employers. But I don't want, I mean, the way this sentence is written, I've hidden the fact that it's the employees who are overlooking the work history. Employers overlook applicants with gaps in work history. And that's very clear. And I've clearly articulated who is doing the overlooking. And again, if you want to hide the employer, that's fine. Use the passive voice, but don't just default to the passive voice. And our final strategy is try not to rely excessively on a bunch of to be verbs. Is, was, were, are. They're not precise verbs. So what happens is you don't have to be precise in your thinking. If you try to have more precise verbs, your sentence is going to be more vibrant and clearer, and you'll probably have a better chance of communicating your point. Let's do a couple of examples. There are a number of people at the company who are in a possible position of being promoted if it is the right time. Look at all those is verbs. There are, who are, if it is the right time. That's 3 in one sentence. Again, nothing grammatically wrong here, but nothing particularly communicative here either. Nothing clarifying. The message is lost. Figure out the verb that really is precise, that captures the action going on. The company plans to promote people at the right time. Plans to promote. Now, that's something I can see. I can't see is, was, are, were. So try to get more active constructions. Let the subject do a precise verb. And you know what'll happen too is your thinking will get more precise. Here's another example. This stuff's actually, this last one, strategy 4, is really hard to do. Here's one. It is my view that entrepreneurship is interesting to me and is an option in my future. Is, is, is. Come on, give me a subject, give me a verb that does something. Entrepreneurship interests me now and for the future. That's tighter. Okay, so here's our recap. Cutting the waste. Identify your meaning ratio and work to increase it. Eliminate wordiness with those 4 strategies. Let's get your writing tight. There's some resources here for you. I particularly enjoy the Grammar Girl podcast. and I highly recommend it. In the next lecture, we're going to work on adding precision. We've cut the waste. Now we're going to add the good ingredients. We'll see you in the next lecture.